Hey guys, today we're going to go through an entire edit and get an image ready for print. I've selected this moose image and I'm going to convert it to black and white. So I am in Lightroom right now. If I go to my develop section in Lightroom, you can see that I've made some minor adjustments to it. I'm going to hit reset so you can see what the original raw file looked like. So pretty subtle. And that's about all I'm going to do in Lightroom. So I'm going to actually right click on the image now, go to edit in, and we're going to go to edit in Adobe Photoshop. All right, my intended outcome with this image is to actually print it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to convert it to the color printer or the color profile for my printer and specific paper type. So I'm going to go to image, or I'm going to go to edit, convert to profile. And the source base is what the image is currently in. So it's in ProPhoto RGB. The destination space is what I want to convert it to. So this long garbled name is for Haniel Fine Art on my Epson SureColor P9000 using PhotoReg Pearl paper. So I'm going to click preview and you can see there's not really any changes. I would say that's not typically normal when I'm converting from color profiles. Typically you'll see more drastic changes, something along the lines of this. And I actually like this result better, because if you look at the background here, you can see it kind of evens out some of those chunky dark tones. The one thing I don't like is if you look at the moose torso here, kind of makes it flat. So I'm actually going to go back. So these conversion options allows you to change how those colors are rendered when they're converting to different profiles. So I'm going to go back to relative colorimetric. Typically, perceptual will give you the most natural transition from one color profile to the next. But in this regard, perceptual works out pretty well. So I'm going to hit OK. Now I can begin my edits. So with this image, my intended outcome is for black and white. So the first thing I'm going to do is go up to my adjustment layers panel here on the top right, and I'm going to click black and white. And part of the reason I'm choosing black and white is because I know it's going to convert well. You know, there's great highlights, there's great shadows, but I also have this really uniform background of green tones. And in black and white, that allows me to make some more radical adjustments that will give me a really, simplistic, eye-catching conversion. So I'm going to enable this black and white color, or black and white layer. And I'm going to click on this circle here. And it's going to pull up my color channels that I can adjust for black and white. And I want to make it very dark and very contrasty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag my greens down. And you can see how it darkens. Now I'm going to go with my yellows. And you can see how that kind of falls off there. How far you want to push it is totally up to you. But overall, I'm pretty happy with that. So there's some things I don't like that were adjusted. You can see the moose's torso darkens quite a bit. So I'm going to click on my background layer. I'm actually going to make another black and white layer. And I'm going to drag that above the black and white one, my first adjustment layer. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my black and white one layer, the one with the more radical adjustments, and I'm going to mask out the areas that I don't like. So I'm going to go get my paintbrush. I'm going to make sure it's set to black. And we're going to come in and we're going to paint this out. Now I like the contrast in the face, so I'm going to undo that painting I just did there. But I'm mainly concerned with the torso here. And these really dark, chunky spots by the mouth. I want to pull that detail back in. What's nice is you can see I did some overlap here within the water. You can see the background starting to come back in. So I'm just going to switch my brush to white. And I'm going to paint that back in to get it nice and dark. I'm going to change my flow up here so it's a little bit stronger. So think of flow kind of like feathering. It's really going to kind of minimize those adjustments. Or it's going to make a harder edge. So it'll come through stronger. Might go in the nose and the nostrils here a bit. All right. So now that we're zoomed into 100%, you can see that it didn't pull all these highlights down like I wanted. So the next step we're going to do, now that we've done our conversion and we've made our basic adjustment, is I'm going to click on the background layer here, and I'm going to go to my Luminiza plugin. This is a third-party plugin, and these are luminosity masks. So they allow me to select specific color ranges or tonal ranges that I want to adjust. And I like to use the dodge and burn layer here. So I'm going to click dodge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a tonal range. So as you can see here, there's a lot of different options. All the L's represent light. They allow you to target different ranges of highlights, such as here. Everything that's white is what's going to be adjusted. Everything that's black is going to be left alone. Midtones here, you can see those odd highlights in the background come through rather nice. So right now I'm probably going to use this M3 that I clicked on. And on the right hand side in the Luminiza dialog, there's this green slider here, and that really allows you to kind of refine those areas of adjustment. And once you're happy with your selection, which I am here, I'm going to go back and click select. And what that's done is it's created a dodge and burn layer here. So you can go grab your dodge and burn tool. I want burn because I want to decrease those exposures. I'm going to select midtones. And I'm going to go through and paint on those areas that didn't get toned down. And what's nice about this is I'm not actually removing anything. I'm just adjusting the tonal range or the tonal values within the image. So I'm not cloning, I'm not removing anything. I'm just doing a modern digital dodging and burning comparable to what Ansel Adams achieved in the darkroom. I'm going to change it to shadows now, since those values are a lot darker now. And I'll go back and paint over those. When you get close to edges too, you can zoom in really far, like 200%. Go after them that way too, to make sure you're not going over sections of the image that you don't want to adjust. And you'll notice some individual pixels here that aren't really being adjusted. And that will be taken care of when I do noise removal before print. All right, I'm going to zoom out now. Kind of target the lower part of this image now. And I don't want to impact the reflection here, but I do want to darken this bottom right corner here. I'm not concerned about really removing all of that because there are highlights on the mousse that I do want to come through. All right, let's tackle that one right there. All right. So when I edit, I'm always conscious of the background color I'm editing on. So for me, editing on white is important because that's how my images are usually viewed, whether that's on Instagram or on my website. I like that high key white background. So I always edit on white so that my images translate properly to the viewer. When I go to printing and framing as well, I typically do everything on a white mat. So I want it to come through and, you know, impact the viewer as it does me on my computer screen. And so now I'm happy with the overall conversion. Now I'm going to tackle a few different things like contrast on the mousse. I want to brighten some of these highlights as well in the water and in the reflection. So I'm going to get rid of my dodge and burn tool here. I've clicked on the background layer and I'm going to deselect now. So Command D on a Mac. And I'm doing this to deselect the previous shadow selection I made. And I'm going to go back to Lumineza here. And I'm going to hit dodge. I'm going to use the narrow zone picker here. So there's two pickers here. We have the narrow zone or the wide zone picker. And this allows you to target a specific color range or a specific tonal value. And here I want to target just the highlights. So I'm going to zoom in here and pick not a pure white spot, but kind of a lower white value there. And when you click the picker, you can see where it shows up here on the color picker. And I'm going to hit OK. So as you can see, it selected all the highlights there. Now I can refine that selection with the green slider in the Lumineza dialog box. So here I've broadened it a bit. Now I'm fairly happy with that overall. So I'm going to hit select now. And we've created a second dodge and burn layer. And this time I want to brighten that up. So I'm going to go to the dodge tool. And we're going to select highlights here. I'm going to drop my exposure down to probably 45–50%. And I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger here, and we're going to go in and brighten those values. All right, and as you can see, I'm avoiding the highlights on the moose's, snout here, forehead, and ear. I don't really want those to be any brighter. I think those are pretty perfect. All right, now I'm going to toggle this dodge and burn layer off to show you what we've done here. You can see even those water droplets have increased in brightness. Now next, I'm going to go to the background layer and hit deselect again. And now I want to brighten this reflection just a little bit. So we're going to click dodge again. We're going to use the narrow zone picker, and we're going to pick kind of a mid value within this reflection here. So I don't want the brightest, I don't want the darkest, I want something right in the middle. And you can see how the highlights we already adjusted are completely excluded from that adjustment. They're all black, so the white is what we want. So I am going to hit select now. We're going to go to the burn or the dodge tool. I'm going to select midtones. And I'm going to drop my exposure even lower. I don't want to brighten these too much, but just enough. Toggle it on and off. Now, the final step. So I want to increase contrast kind of on these darker values on the moose. So clicked on my background. I'm going to hit deselect now, so Command D again. And I'm going to go to Luminiza and I'm going to select contrast. And what this allows me to do is it allows me to define how I want the contrast to be made. So it gives me the color picker, and I'm going to select two color values in which I want to see the contrast increase. So here I'm going to select my bright first. So I'm going to go with this on the moose. I'm going to hit OK. Now it's going to give me a dialog box to pick the second value. And I don't want to go for something that's pure black, but something that's, right in between black and what I picked before. So I'm going to select right here. We're going to zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to toggle this contrast layer off so you can see what was done here. So overall, I'm happy with the contrast, but there are sections that I don't want adjusted. These dark shadowed lines in the shoulder, or this got really blocky here down by the water on the neck. So we're going to go to our layers tab, and we're going to have our contrast layer selected, and we're going to put a layer mask on it. We are then going to go to our paintbrush tool, make sure black's selected. I'm going to change the opacity or the density of the brush down to about 40%. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and lightly adjust these areas that I don't want adjusted. Now I'm going to increase my opacity a little bit. It's not as strong as I would like. The goal in removing a lot of these really clunky blacks on your subject matter is when you go to do noise removal on them, if you have really strong blacks and you're taking a lot of grain out or noise out, that noise actually helps with gradation. So it helps with color transitions. So if you have something that's really contrasty before you do the noise removal and then apply it, it turns these blacks into really strong, clunky blacks. They're really blocked up. You lose a lot of that detail. So the goal is to avoid having that happen in noise reduction. So the last thing I want is a big solid chunk of black on my subject with no detail in it. And sometimes that works, but most of the time that's not what I want in my images. So I may go back even and brighten some of these shadowed areas on our first dodge and burn layer here that we used to darken the background. So I'm going to select this dodge and burn layer. I'm going to go down to my dodge tool. We're going to hit shadows. We're going to brighten those up just a bit, just to bring back some of that detail. Do Command Z here so you can see the changes. Command Z is the Mac shortcut for undo. Oops. You want to be careful with how much you do this too. You know, it's contingent upon what camera you're using, what kind of dynamic range it has. You know, if you push this too far, a lot of times you're just going to pull out more grain and noise than you are detail. And in that case, it's not really going to have the impact that you want. I'm going to darken this a bit here. All right, I'm going to go back to my contrast layer here, grab the paintbrush, make sure we have the mask selected, and I'm going to paint out this. All right, we're going to do one final scan here. We're going to go to our dodge and burn layer here for shadows. And if it helps you, you can change all these names of the layers so that you can organize them better. You know, if you double click on the name, you can change it. So for me, it's not that big of a deal. I can look at the adjustments here on this little box and tell which layer it's been. But if you end up having an image that you have 30 or 40 layers like this on there, it might help to label them so you know what exactly each layer is. All right, I'm on the dodge and burn layer for shadows. I'm going to switch back to dodge. We got shadows, and we're just going to go right in here. Try to get rid of that big chunkiness there. All right. So now I think we're done with this one. So for fun, we'll turn off all these black and white layers, or all these adjustment layers, excluding the first black and white, so you can see the final transition. All right. So at this point, what I typically do is I save this image. So what we're going to do next requires that we flatten and eliminate all these adjustment layers and compress it so we can no longer go back. So I'm going to choose my destination folder for that. And now we're in my database here. So I'm in images. I'm going to go to print files here. I'm going to go to website images. I'm going to click new. This is where I want that file to end up. I want to make sure it includes layers, and I want to make sure that the color profile for my printer and paper is embedded. And I choose to either use TIFF or Photoshop documents, PSDs. So I'm going to use TIFF, and we're going to hit save. I already have this file created in there from an earlier edit. So we are going to choose a different destination for the time being. We're just going to put it in the website photos. I want to compare the two edits and see which one I like better. So we'll put it here and hit save. Now for me, I don't really change any of this. I always have it on Macintosh because I'm always editing on a Mac. And I always select none for compression on that. And I hit OK. Now next we're going to bring this image in for sharpening. And I chose this image because A, I really like it, and B, the eye's sharp, but we've lost some sharpness on this moose. There was some front focus on it. So we can fix that using a third-party plugin. I'm using Topaz. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten the image. I'm going to go to layers and flatten. Now I have the plugins installed in Photoshop for Topaz. So I go up to Filter, Topaz Labs, and I'm going to do Sharpen. Now there's a couple different modes here, but the first thing I'm going to do is change the magnification. So Topaz says this is 100%, and I've done some comparison in Photoshop, and I find Topaz to actually put it at about 200%. So I zoom out to 50%, and that makes it comparable to 100% in Photoshop. I'm going to drag this to the area of the moose where I am most concerned about focus. So it's mainly the head, the face, and the fur here. I was working with a long 500mm lens, so my depth of field's shallow as is. Next, I'm going to define the mode that I want to use here on the right-hand column. So we can do typical sharpen, which is what I do for most images that are tack sharp and don't need any help. There's a stabilize feature, which is for lenses that have a little bit of motion blur. if you want to try to recover that or minimize that impact. Or there's focus. So I'm going to select focus here. And I'm going to bump my sharpness up to about 78%. And I'm not too worried about noise right now, so I'm going to decrease my noise depression, because I will remove noise later in Topaz Denoise. So another interesting thing to do is auto update preview. So you can unclick that. You can make your adjustments you want and then hit update. Otherwise, anytime you move the image or make an adjustment on the slider, it's going to try to generate that update on its own. So I'm going to drop my noise suppression more. I'm going to bring sharpness to 75 here. Now I'll hit update. All right. So up in view, you have a few different options here. You can do the single view, which will show you the adjustments that you've made. You'll have split view, which is what I have, or you can do side by side. So side by side will give you the unadjusted file versus the adjusted. I choose to do split view because you can go to the center line here and wait for that arrowed cursor to appear. And you can drag it back and forth and see the adjustment. You can see how it changes the sharpness in the face, the eyes, and the water. In the ear. Now there are some undesirable adjustments on here that I don't like. You know, like on the neck here, the back. So there's a few different solutions that we can use. We can, increase noise suppression to help minimize that. Or we could decrease sharpening. Or we could do a little bit of both. So in this case, I'm going to increase noise suppression a little bit. I'm going to decrease sharpness a little bit. And I'm going to hit update again. All right, that's a little better. Oops. So the problem of when you accidentally miss the slider here and grab the image is you have to re-update that preview for that area of the image. So we'll actually do that anyways. We'll refine our view to include more of these water droplets, the front snout, and we will hit update. All right. So we'll grab this slider now. You can see it sharpens that water, tip of the nose, even some of those fine hairs there. Brings those back into focus. So overall, I'm pretty happy with that. There's a few things I don't like. And the other thing you can help to mitigate that is you can actually mask out and selectively sharpen things in images. So same thing as Photoshop. It brings up a brush system for you, such as this. You can change the radius, you can add or subtract from it. You can have it use edge awareness, so it won't impact things that aren't along the edge. You can change the size, the softness, and the opacity of the adjustment layer. So in this image, I don't need to do any of that. So I am not too worried about that. We've lost our preview here once we clicked on the mask, so I'm going to hit update again. There we go. So a lot of the things I don't like the noisiness in the top of the head here and along the back, will be removed in Topaz Denoise. So I'm content with this image. Next thing I'm going to do is going to hit apply. This will apply all the sharpening and adjustments we made to this image and reopen it up in Photoshop. And then I can view the changes that we've made with more scrutiny at 100% in Photoshop without having to regenerate this preview each time. All right, it's now opened in Photoshop, so I'm going to zoom in here to 100% and take a look at all the other things it did. So, there's some undesirable effects here on the moose. You know how I talked about losing some of that contrast and getting blocky shadows? And this is a result of that noise suppression and sharpening. So if we go to history, you can actually toggle back. So Topaz Sharpen is the last thing that we did. So if we go to flatten image, you can bring it back. See, it's trying to sharpen that section of the image, and I don't think that's necessary. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to flatten. And how I'm going to mitigate this is we can mask it out in Topaz, but I find that to be kind of cumbersome and a major pain. So I'm actually going to duplicate this image. So image, duplicate. All right, so we'll apply the Topaz sharpening to the copy or the duplicate. So we'll go into Topaz again. We're going to go to focus. We're at 65 and I think at 23 for noise suppression. We'll hit apply. And then once this is done, and it applies this adjustment to the duplicate image, we'll drag that duplicate image onto the original, and we'll create a layer mask, and we'll mask out the things that we don't like that Topaz did. And then once we're done, we'll flatten it, and then we'll bring it into Topaz denoise and remove the noise, and then it's ready for print. All right. So we'll grab our little move tool here. We're going to click on the image, hold it down, and we're going to drag it over to the original. Now I'm going to bring the cursor over it and I'm going to hit shift. This will make sure when I release it, it lines up properly with the other image. All right. So I can now close this copy. I don't need that anymore. I don't want to save it. So we'll go to layers here and you'll see we have two layers. We're going to zoom in and take a look at what it's done. You can see all this clunkiness here that I don't like. And I don't necessarily want focus on this. It's meant to be out of focus. This foreground here, though, this fur here, I do want that sharpness. Maybe not to that level. So the beauty of using layer masks is I can paint over with a brush using different opacities to allow some of that adjustment to come through or none of it. So we'll zoom out a bit here, and I'm going to focus on this section first. And I don't really want any of that coming through. So I'm going to change my opacity up to 100. I'm going to strengthen my flow so I have a harder edge. Make sure I have black. I have my layer mask selected. Make my brush a little bigger here, and we're going to paint that out. Because I don't like that. I'm going to paint the back edge of this moose too here. I don't need any of that noise or grain there because it's meant to be out of focus. All right. Now I'm going to change my opacity. We'll start at about 30%, 35%. I'm just going to paint over lightly. And I start lower because it allows me to make subtle adjustments. And I can go back over it again if I want. And again, this is supposed to be a little out of focus, so I don't need it to be super sharp. I'm going to make my brush small and target this little area here. I don't like any of that right there, so. And Topaz 2 will apply it in weird places that don't really make sense sometimes, like the water here. So I'm going to bring my opacity back up to 100, and I'm going to paint over this. I don't want any of that sharpened. Make it bigger because I'm not really concerned about it applying anywhere or any overlap. All right, I think we got it all here. Take one last look here. I don't mind this on top of the head because it brought in some sharpness, and the noise removal will get rid of the remaining bit that looks a little funky. All right. Looks good. So I'm going to zoom out now. Made our adjustments here. If you look at the layer mask, you can see the white areas on the bottom that we missed. And just for safekeeping, I'm going to remove all that because I don't need anything applied to that. Excuse me. All right, now we're going to flatten the image again. And now I'll go to my move tool. I'm going to go to Topaz Labs, and now we're going to do denoise. I'm going to cancel because I don't want that preview to update because I haven't made the adjustments I want. I'm going to zoom out to about 50% here. Drag up to where I want. And again, there's 3 different modes you can use in this one. So there's denoise. This gives you full control. You can fine tune the noise removal, the sharpness. You can cover original detail or color noise reduction if you're working in a color image. There's AI Clear, which is a little bit more automated. Gives you simpler settings for removing noise and enhancing sharpness. And then there's low light, which allows you to completely eradicate sharpness. This is the only one where you can fully remove the sharpness. So we'll play with a few of these. I typically use AI Clear or Low Light for my images. So we're going to start with low light here. And you don't typically need the noise removing setting very high, or the remove noise setting very high. So we're going to start with 10, and we're going to hit update. So low light and AI Clear are typically the fastest for generating previews on. All right, so once again we have the slider here. You can see what's been done. You know, we've lost a little bit of detail here. You can see our black's getting a little clunky. I don't think it's a bad thing. We're going to go to AI Clear now. So I'm going to leave Enhanced Sharpness at low. And I'm going to leave Remove Noise at low. You can see there's some funky banding here. Sometimes that happens. That's why it's good to play with other modules or modes. So that's not going to fly. Now I'm going to try removing the noise higher and seeing if that makes a difference. So it did. It got rid of that banding. So now I'm going to drag to a different part of the image, like here, where the noise is going to be more apparent. So we're going to hit update now. I'm going to try increasing recover original detail a bit. Oops. Once again, I missed that slider there. Let's hit update. Overall, I think that's pretty good. So we'll hit apply. I'm going to zoom in to 100% here and take a look. I'll zoom out. And she's done. She's ready for print. So in the next tutorial, I will go through my process of laying out sheets to be printed. You know, I'm using a 44-inch wide printer, so it's very rare that I'm actually printing to the full width of my printer. So to conserve paper waste, I'll create sheets with multiple images in different sizes and lay them out so I can conserve my paper. But that will be in the next tutorial. So thanks for joining me on this. Have a great day, guys.